Long ago, far from the noise of the modern world, beyond rolling hills, winding paths, and whispering forests, there existed a small Italian village where time seemed to move more slowly. Stone cottages rested beneath terracotta roofs, narrow streets echoed with soft footsteps, and every sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and rose. In this quiet village lived an old woodcarver named Geppetto. Geppetto's cottage stood at the edge of the village, close enough to hear church bells in the morning, yet far enough to feel the hush of solitude. The house was small and weather-worn, its wooden door creaking with age, its windows glowing faintly at night from the warmth of a single fire. Each morning, Geppetto rose with the sun. He brewed himself a simple cup of tea, ate a piece of dry bread, and sat at his wooden workbench. His hands, though aged and rough, moved with gentle precision as he carved toys, little horses, spinning tops, music boxes, and puppets for the village children. The children loved his creations, but when evening fell and the laughter faded, Geppetto returned to an empty home. He would sit by the fire, staring into the flames, remembering a time when his house was filled with voices and joy. Those days were long gone now, leaving behind only memories and a quiet ache in his heart. Often he spoke aloud to the silence. "If only I had a child," he would whisper, "someone to teach, someone to love." One autumn afternoon, with golden leaves drifting softly to the ground, Geppetto walked into the nearby forest to gather firewood. The forest was old and wise, its tall trees bending gently in the wind as though they were listening. As Geppetto searched the forest floor, his eyes caught sight of something unusual. Between the thick roots of an ancient tree lay a piece of pinewood, smooth, golden, and untouched by rot or decay. Sunlight filtered through the branches above, resting upon the wood as if marking it for a special purpose. Geppetto reached down and touched it. The pinewood felt warm, not warm from the sun, but warm as if it held life inside. A strange feeling filled Geppetto's heart, something between wonder and hope. Smiling softly, he lifted the pinewood and said, almost shyly, "You'll make something special. I know it." He carried it home, unaware that fate itself had guided his steps that day. That evening, as the fire crackled gently and moonlight streamed through the window, Geppetto placed the pinewood upon his workbench. With careful hands he began to carve. Chip by chip, the wood took shape. First, a round head, then bright eyes, then arms, legs, and a cheerful smile. As he worked, Geppetto spoke softly to the wooden figure. "If only you were a real boy," he sighed, his voice trembling with hope. "I would love you with all my heart." When the wooden puppet was finished, Geppetto stepped back and smiled. "I shall call you Pinocchio." Placing the wooden puppet on a chair beside the fire, Geppetto wished him good night and drifted into sleep, unaware that magic was already stirring in the room. As midnight arrived, a gentle blue glow filled the cottage. A soft breeze rustled the curtains, and a radiant figure appeared, the Blue Fairy. Blue Fairy gazed at Geppetto with kindness, then turned to the wooden puppet. "Little Pinocchio," she whispered, "a loving heart has given you life." With a wave of her wand, magic sparkled through the room. Pinocchio's fingers twitched, his eyes blinked, and suddenly he sat up. "I can move, I can talk," he laughed. The fairy smiled. "To become a real boy," she said, You must learn to be brave, truthful, and unselfish." Before leaving, she gave Pinocchio a conscience Jiminy Cricket to guide him whenever he felt lost. When morning came, soft sunlight slipped through the cracks of the old wooden shutters, warming the tiny cottage with a gentle golden glow. Geppetto stirred in his bed, half asleep, when a sound reached his ears, clear, bright, and almost unbelievable. It was laughter, not the echo of memory, not a dream, but real laughter, light as bird song. "Papa!" a joyful voice called out. Geppetto's heart skipped a beat. He rose at once, trembling, and turned toward the sound. There stood Pinocchio, alive and moving, his wooden face lit with wonder and happiness, his eyes shining as though a spark of life danced within them. He ran forward without hesitation and threw his arms around the old man. Tears spilled freely down Geppetto's wrinkled cheeks as he gathered the boy into a tight embrace. Years of loneliness, quiet nights, and unspoken prayers poured out in that moment. "My son," he whispered, his voice breaking with joy and disbelief. "My precious son." The walls of the cottage, once silent and heavy with solitude, now echoed with warmth and laughter. The hearth seemed brighter, the air fuller, and Geppetto knew with a gratitude too deep for words that his home was no longer empty. It was alive. Wanting the very best for his son, wooden puppet, Geppetto resolved that Pinocchio must go to school just like other children. Though he had little to give, he gave what mattered most. On a chilly morning, he sold his only coat, the one that kept him warm through harsh winters, to buy Pinocchio a simple schoolbook. He smiled as he handed it over, hiding the cold in his bones behind a father's pride. Pinocchio promised to study hard and make his papa proud. With the book tucked under his arm and excitement in his step, he set off towards school. But the world beyond the cottage was wide and dazzling, filled with noise, color, and temptation. Along the way, he met the sly fox and the clever cat, who spoke sweetly and laughed loudly, filling his ears with promises of easy riches and endless fun. They told him school could wait, that hard work was foolish, and that life was meant for pleasure. Their lies shimmered like gold, and Pinocchio, young and curious, listened. Though Jiminy Cricket warned him, Pinocchio ignored his conscience. He followed them and soon found himself tricked, robbed, and alone. When questioned by the Blue Fairy later, Pinocchio lied out of fear. Instantly, his nose grew longer and longer until birds perched upon it. Ashamed and frightened, Pinocchio cried. The fairy forgave him, shrinking his nose and reminding him, "Truth may hurt, but lies hurt more." Drawn by the sound of music and applause, Pinocchio followed a lively tune that danced through the streets like magic. It led him to a brightly painted puppet theatre, where banners fluttered and crowds gathered in delight. The puppets inside moved and laughed just as he did, and when Pinocchio stepped onto the stage, the audience gasped in wonder. Never before had they seen a puppet that could speak, think, and move on his own. Behind the curtain, however, stood Stromboli, the towering, cruel showman whose booming voice filled the theatre like thunder. His beard bristled, his eyes glittered with greed, and his hands shook, not with excitement, but with desire for profit. When the show ended and the applause faded, Stromboli seized Pinocchio and dragged him backstage. "You are not a boy," Stromboli roared. "You are a miracle, and miracles make money. He locked Pinocchio in a wooden cage, laughing as he counted his coins, planning to take him from town to town as a living attraction. Alone in the darkness, Pinocchio felt fear creep into his wooden heart. For the first time, he truly understood what it meant to lose freedom. He thought of Geppetto waiting at home, of the warm cottage, and of the promise he had broken. When the blue fairy appeared, her gentle light filled the cage. She asked him why he had strayed, and Pinocchio, trembling with shame, spoke the truth at last. His honesty broke the spell of the lock, and the cage door slowly opened. With courage in his steps, though free again, Pinocchio had not yet learned to resist temptation. Soon he was lured by another false promise. Pleasure Island, a place where there were no rules, no schools, and no consequences. The land glittered with games, sweets, and endless laughter. Boys ran wild, breaking things, skipping lessons, and mocking responsibility, believing joy could last forever. At first, Pinocchio laughed and played, losing himself in the noise and excitement. Days passed without care, and he forgot his promise to be good. But slowly, something dark crept into the fun. The laughter turned harsh, the games cruel. One by one, the boys began to change. Their voices grew rough, their backs bent, and ears stretched long and heavy. Pinocchio watched in horror as the boys transformed into donkeys, forced into chains, and sold away like beasts of burden. Terror gripped him as he felt his own ears begin to ache and lengthen. At that moment, he understood the terrible cost of laziness, mischief, and a life without responsibility. Driven by fear and regret, Pinocchio ran as fast as his wooden legs could carry him, escaping the island just in time. As the shoreline faded behind him, he vowed to change not out of fear alone, but out of a growing desire to become worthy of love, freedom, and the chance to be a real boy. When Pinocchio learned the terrible truth that Geppetto had been swallowed by a monstrous creature of the sea, while searching endlessly for his lost son, his wooden heart felt heavier than it ever had before. Guilt washed over him like a storm. His papa had faced the vast, unforgiving ocean alone, driven only by love and hope. Without a moment of hesitation, Pinocchio ran to the shore. The waves roared like warnings. The sky darkened, and fishermen shouted for him to stay back. But fear could no longer stop him. Love was stronger than fear. With a final breath and a whispered prayer for courage, Pinocchio leapt into the cold, churning sea. The waters pulled him deep into darkness until he found himself inside the belly of the great sea monster, a place, shadow, silence, and despair. There, amid broken ships and floating debris, Pinocchio saw a faint light. As he followed it, his heart nearly burst when he saw Geppetto, weary and thin, yet still alive. The old man's eyes filled with tears as father and son embraced once more, holding each other as though they might never let go. Together, they devised a daring escape. Using fire and cleverness, they made the monster sneeze with a thunderous roar that shook the sea itself. In a violent rush of water and foam, they were hurled back into the open ocean, clinging to one another as they fought their way towards safety, free at last, but utterly exhausted. The shore was quiet when they reached it. The storm now spent, Geppetto collapsed onto the sand, weak but alive, while Pinocchio stood guard, trembling from exhaustion. He had given everything his strength, his courage, his very self to save his father. At last, his wooden body could carry him no more, and he fell beside Geppetto, unmoving. In that moment of selfless sacrifice, a gentle glow filled the air. The blue fairy appeared once more, her light soft and warm, her eyes filled with compassion. Blue Fairy looked upon Pinocchio and saw not a puppet, but a brave and loving soul, one who had learned the true meaning of honesty, responsibility, and love. Because of his courage, his kindness, and his willingness to give his life for another, the Blue Fairy raised her wand. Magic shimmered like starlight, wrapping Pinocchio in warmth and wonder. Slowly, wood turned to flesh, joints softened, and a real heartbeat began to echo where none had been before. When Pinocchio opened his eyes, he was no longer a puppet. He was a real boy. Geppetto wept with joy as he held his son, knowing their long journey had finally led them home. Together, they walked forward into a new life, one built on love, truth, and the miracle of a second chance. Pinocchio came to understand, at last, that being real was never about the body. He was made of neither carved wood nor living flesh defined the truth of who he was. What made him real were the choices he learned to make, the courage to face fear, the honesty to speak the truth even when it was difficult, and the love that guided him back whenever he strayed. Each mistake had shaped him. Each act of kindness had strengthened him, and every sacrifice had brought him closer to becoming the boy he had always wished to be. And so, in a quiet Italian village where cobbled streets glowed under the soft light of evening, a lonely woodcarver's humble wish blossomed into a miracle. The laughter of a real boy now filled a cottage once marked by silence, and warmth returned to a home that had known only longing. What began as a simple dream, carved from hope, became a story passed from heart to heart, a reminder that miracles are born not from magic alone, but from love, perseverance, and faith. And that miracle, gentle and enduring, would be remembered forever.